but Hughie thinks that Butcher kills Stillwell, and he's like, well, she was already dead, mate. You know, like his whole thing that he does.
That was good. That was pretty good.
He blew up Madeline Stillwell.
I told ya. She was already dead when I blew her up.
We're back for another breakdown of The Boys Season 2 with Episode 2, where we finally found out what happened with Butcher and Homelander and got a whole lot of that storyline. So, I'm Dave. I have only seen the show, joined by Mike. Mike has read the comics.
I have read most of the comics. I'm working my way through them. Yeah, so we organized this episode by character because it jumped around so much, and we found that when we were taking our notes, we were going from scene to scene to scene to scene to scene, and we thought, let's just go with the location and the groups of characters to organize this. Thought that would be a little bit easier. So we're gonna start by talking about Butcher.
So we find out that Butcher has been dropped off somewhere totally different in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where clearly
at a Tony
Homelander,
Cicero's, which is a running joke. That's where their hideout initially in season 1, where they brought Translucent and killed Translucent, was in the back of a Tony Cicero's.
But yeah, we learned that Homelander clearly dropped him off here. So what's implied essentially is that Homelander made a deal with Becca Butcher where he would get to see the kid, his son, if he let Butcher live. That's what I think is implied. But Butcher is still,
it's implied later on. I agree with you. Yeah, that's what happened.
But Butcher is still adamant to find Becca, and I'm amazed that he remembered all these details in that brief amount of time. So I wrote down his notes. He wrote Yellow Ranch House, sun 60 degrees Celsius, 9/1, which I'm assuming is the date, so September 1st. Northwest breeze, wet large pines, juniper, no sidewalk, St. Augustine glass. How in the world could he tell the temperature? Like, you could gauge, like, okay, it was warm. And the northwest breeze. That's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, so I think the degrees was related to sun. So sun 60 degrees, as in the sun was 60 degrees off the horizon. I think he was trying to calculate his latitude based on the location of the sun.
Okay, got it. Because, yeah, then it had
that
the
was how I interpreted
9-1. Yeah, 60 degrees Celsius. I guess that would be like 150 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Something like insane.
I don't know what the C stands for, though, in that case.
We talked about this a bit in the breakdown for episode 1, but Hughie thinks that Butcher kills Stillwell, and he's like, well, she was already dead, mate. You know, like his whole thing that he does.
That was good. That was pretty good.
Thanks. All you have to do is be really gruff with it.
So Butcher's having a hard time convincing people that he didn't actually kill Stillwell, although he doesn't really put a lot of effort into setting the record straight.
Yeah,
the boys. He's obviously.
I was gonna say exactly that.
He's being pretty calculating as far as what he reveals to them. You know.
Yeah. He doesn't really say much.
Let's get more into them later, because I wanted to talk first about the press junket.
Yes.
That Starlight and Stormfront have to spend this entire episode doing. Let's get this out of the way. Nobody likes press junkets. Talent doesn't like press junkets.
Press
Journalists
doesn't like press
junket. I don't like press junkets. They're annoying. And then just them getting asked, like, what, talk about girl power. Like, are girls better?
Yeah.
Do girls make better heroes? And it's like, it's another way that the show is ingratiating us toward Stormfront, because Stormfront is the one who goes, okay, hang on a second, that's a dumb question. Shut the up, right? Like, that's her reaction, and as a viewer, we're going, seriously, thank you. Somebody had to say it. So again, like, she is gonna turn out to be a bad guy, and but it's the show doing a good job. Like, they're doing a good job again of having these characters who are bad, but they aren't 100% just evil all the time. It's like, they're multi-dimensional characters. That's one thing I love about the show so much. I like how uncomfortable she makes Homelander, and this is something we see in episode 3 a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But we saw it in episode 1. She unbalances him.
I'd agree with that.
And that's, even if you don't like her as you don't want to hang out with her or whatever, it's refreshing and fun on the show to see somebody who speaks truth to power, isn't afraid of Homelander, and takes these people who are used to, winning every conversation and sets them off balance. So she's she's an interesting dynamic with the rest of the 7.
To your note, though, I think you hit the nail on the head with the sense of like, this is what I like about the writing of the show, is that it's a little more gray, and that Stormfront does say things that you could really agree with, right? She's not all bad. And I think that's an important note, especially where she's going to be headed to be more bad, that there are going to be things where you're like, yeah, but I agree with her on this. Like, I think that's good to have a character that's not 100% evil, right? You know, it's like, okay, well, she'll have some opinions that you agree with and some that you're probably going to really disagree with.
And
but
there's a through line there's a through line in the show and in the comics about Butcher's black and white view of the world getting challenged because of what has happened to him and the experiences he's had and what he knows. You know, all soups are evil. All soups are the same. That's his perspective, and that gets slowly whittled away at. Even though many soups are evil and are terrible people, some of them really are good, like Starlight, and some of them are just a little more complicated than he wants to give them credit for.
Right, and I think that's an important portrayal that not everything's black and white. That's a really good thing that this show does in general. A-Train's back, though. A-Train's back.
That's the other thing that happens during the press junket.
Yeah, that was like were you expecting that when they're like, I know, they're like, so what if we were to tell you A-Train's right here behind you? It was like a...
Yeah, that was one thing that was unrealistic in that, you know, A-Train works for Vought, and if he's woken up from his coma, like somebody involved with Vought would, I mean, like, we don't know what outlet was interviewing her or like who orchestrated that. If it was a thing that Ashley orchestrated,
I have to imagine Ashley orchestrated it. It had to be an Ashley thing. So we get another important thing in the green room, though, which is that clearly A-Train remembers what happened, A, because Starlight wasn't sure, and B, he hasn't told anyone what happened at the end of season 1.
It's interesting because, you know, he's clearly in it for himself a little bit, and he's enjoying having this this sword of Damocles to hang over. I'm mixing metaphors. He's enjoying lording this over her. Yeah. But he clearly hasn't decided what he's gonna do yet. And he's not stupid, right? So she's testing him a little bit, trying to figure out what he remembers, but then he's testing her a little bit as well to see, you know, they're kind of trying to find the limits of what one another is capable of. And Starlight, much as she showed when she blackmailed Gecko in the previous episode, she shows that, you know, she's capable of a little bit more than she probably would have been at the beginning of season 1 when she was 100% more naive, right? Like,
that does lead to Gecko finally giving her the V at this press junket, or, you know, the green room, whatever, the area that they're at, and A-Train catching it. And she pulls a really sly move. It's funny, when I first watched it, I thought maybe Stormfront had given her some assist, because it's really hard to notice her slip the V into the backpack, Stormfront's backpack.
She's slick. I mean, you got to be quick for A-Train to not notice, right?
Yeah, but I guess it's like the magician's trick in a sense, where she, you know, you get someone's attention, so while she's talking to him and they're talking, he's not looking to see where her hands are, per se. He thinks it's in her boot already, so that's where she's able to get away with it.
What did you make of the Pippi Longstocking stuff?
Yeah, I actually did read Pippi Longstocking when I was a kid. I read a couple of the books, and I don't remember them at all. I just remember she lived on an island or something. That's about all I remember. I like them. I think she was really strong. She was like a monkey, kind of, in a way, if I remember correctly. It led to her point. They do a lot of obscure references on the show, or just references. They like to reference things. You know, like there's the whole Spice Girls moment. Not that that's obscure, but the point is, like, they just like to pull in references that mean a lot to the characters. So
or references to Fresco and Tony Cicero's. Who knows?
Yeah, Fresco and Tony Cicero's. So it didn't really... It didn't matter to me. It was like she could have been referencing anything.
I have a feeling later in the season, when a bunch more stuff is revealed, maybe we'll look back on this and be able to say, oh, that's what the Pippi Longstocking thing was about.
I don't think there's much to the character other than I just remember her being kind, and like Stormfront said, she doesn't care what other people think. That's it. I think that's really all that matters about her, honestly, is that it's Stormfront saying, I don't care what people think, just like Pippi Longstocking.
Which I think which further ingratiates us as the audience to her, right?
Right, yeah, that's definitely a positive attribute that you could give to anyone.
Yeah.
And that's what makes someone cool too. You think of someone who's cool, it's because they don't care what people think. She's
definitely
really what
cool.
it is. Yeah.
I mean, she's played by Aya Cash, who I am a huge fan of from the FX series You're the Worst, which ended recently. Anyway, this all leads to A-Train confronting Starlight. He confronts her, and she sticks it to him. You know, she stands up to him, and it's a huge moment for Starlight. You know, their confrontation comes to a head, and she basically wins, right? But they have this mutually assured destruction where if either one of them makes a move on the other, they're going to make sure that the other one goes down with them.
Yeah, it's like playing chess. You got each other in a stalemate.
Mm-hmm. And she also points out that A-Train did a really job killing Popclaw and making it look like an accident, because he did jam a whole bunch of needles into her arm at once, and Starlight reveals that in the autopsy report or whatever, A-Train actually broke one of her arm bones. He jammed the needle in so hard because he was moving. So it happened so fast. It was like this kind of thing. So,
and then we also get a bunch with Queen Maeve, who was going to be a part of this press junket stuff, but decides to just be typical talent and just peace out for her own thing.
I so much appreciate Queen Maeve as a character getting more time in the spotlight, getting more fleshed out, her background, her relationships. I feel like they've already done more with her in season 2 than they did throughout all of season 1.
You know, we've seen her with Homelander really doubting his decisions in season 1. We see her like talking to him and being kind of uncomfortable with the whole scene where Homelander it's while they're at the A-Train's race, and he talks about their relationship and how he's like, I couldn't stand to see you with anyone else. So we see some of that
menacing.
stuff right, and we see some of that in season 1, and while season 2 and episode 2 we're seeing her break down more as a human with her ex-girlfriend, which is nice to see.
I enjoyed seeing some progress in that character arc in the relationship between the two of them, because this has been a thing going on with them for years, clearly. And Queen Maeve finally breaks down and confides in her about why she ended their relationship, how scared she is of Homelander. And you have to remember, like, for us as viewers, we know Homelander is evil and murderous and a psychopath, but the general public's perception of Homelander is that he's basically a Boy Scout with superpowers. So for Queen Maeve to tell somebody that Homelander is a murderer that's huge.
Right, so as I said earlier, it's like we saw those hints in season 1 that maybe she's concerned, and now, like, yeah, that really is what's been destroying her inside. And it's really good to see that and see her humanity come out because of it.
Let's talk about the Deep.
Yeah, someone else who has a lot of humanity coming out this episode.
So the Deep has become fully embroiled with Eagle the Archer and his not therapist, cult leader, I don't know, Carol. Yeah. They are clearly indoctrinating the Deep, whose name is Kevin, we find out. So I think I'm going to call him Kevin from now on. They're indoctrinating him into the Church of the Collective.
And as much as, like, you know, you have the alarm bells going off of, like, this is a cult, this isn't a good thing.
Yeah.
At the same time, it isn't necessarily a bad thing for his character. You know, it's like all the things that they're doing for him in this moment are like, well, he does need that. He does need that help.
Dave, are you on the cult side?
No, well, I mean, they gave him drugs for it, so I don't know if I agree with that. To me, it's more of that intricate look of the gray area of things, where it's like, I see something like this, and your first thing, like I said, is alarm bells of, like, all this stuff is bad. It's a pure bad thing. But at the same time, they are actually genuinely helping the Deep.
Yeah, he's getting a lot more confident. Did you catch who the Gills are voiced by?
I didn't until you wrote it, so please be the one to say it.
I mean, I personally instantly recognize Patton Oswalt's voice. He's one of my favorite comedians. He's so funny. He's so great. Yeah. We get our hair cut by the same barber. That's a fun fact. That's what living in Los Angeles is like. So shout out to Patton. Oh, you did a great job voicing the Gills. As far as the Gills, I find them truly disgusting. I'm sorry, Kevin. but they gross me out. And I know, I would never say that to his face. This is what he's wrestling with, but yeah, they're nasty. It's good body horror. I love good body horror.
And they didn't necessarily, they're a little gross to me, but not like super gross. But what did gross me out was in season 1 when the girl sticking her hands up his gills and you hear that like gurgling noise. Like that makes me cringe. I was like, a lot of people read that. A lot of people read that scene as him being sexually assaulted, as in kind of getting a taste of his own medicine and being victimized in that way. That's how I picked up on it too.
Yeah, and that of course plays into his shame about his body and the way that he treats other people. He's getting a really good character arc that's also not diminishing from the harm that he's done to other people, chief among them Starlight. So the writing on this show is just so good, in the way that it handles stuff like this is amazing. Well, you can also have a scene where the Deep and his gills, who are voiced by Patton Oswalt, are singing "You Are So Beautiful to Me" to each other while he's tripping on shrooms in Sandusky, Ohio.
I do like, again, where this is a character who in the first episode, I think it was the first episode, where he does what he does to Starlight, and you just think, like, this is a disgusting character. It's like he's so unlikable. And they're really not necessarily redeeming him, but they
make him sympathetic.
Right, they make him sympathetic, and you really start to understand him, and like he gets the same thing. It's not the same thing, but something similar happened to him with his sexual assault, where his character starts to really actually understand what he's been doing to people. And it's not a pure evil character. It's like, okay, he did this really bad act, but that doesn't define everything about him. And that's what's interesting and why I like this show so much, is because they're able to do that and pull it off well, in a way that doesn't disrespect people.
Yeah, totally.
So let's move on to someone who is more irredeemable, I think, which is Homelander.
Yeah, good segue. So Homelander spends a lot of time at Becca's house, and this is where we kind of learn. He references at one point the bargain that they made, which we are left to infer is that he allows Butcher to live, and she allows him to hang around. Not that he needs Becca's permission. Obviously, any bargain they made is just Homelander humoring her because he can do whatever the hell he wants. The scenes of him with his son are pretty unsettling.
Oh yeah, so unsettling. He's such a bad father.
He's an absentee father. He hasn't been around, but that wasn't necessarily his fault.
Right. I mean, he clearly, to his credit, he doesn't want to be an absentee father. He actually does want to raise his kid, and like in a way that's he wants to raise his kid because I think the kid feeds his ego. I think it's only in a narcissistic sense. He doesn't give a shit about the kid. Yeah, but I think that's a redeemable factor compared to a real absentee father. At least, like, that's the one thing I'm going to give him. Everything else is terrible. Like, the thing that he tells his kid, like, we're gods, we can do whatever we want, it doesn't matter what other people think, you're going to be my side god. So that stuff that he's, like, telling his kid. Just everything. He's so bad in the way that he deals with his kid. To answer what you said before about the mother, why he is humoring Becca, I would imagine it's because he grew up without parents, and we get that in season 1. That really did affect him. I think he really does care.
I hadn't thought of that.
So I'm thinking maybe he does want his son to have a mom. I could be wrong. Who knows where it's going to lead with the season? But I'm thinking maybe.
I think you're right, though. I think she says at one point we thought it would be best if he had a normal upbringing, and in a way, I think that probably makes Homelander a little bit, jealous or wistful or nostalgic for this fake past that he talked about last season when they were shooting the documentary. And he talked about this season when he initially was lying to the kid, and then he eventually fessed up that it was all made up. But I think it affects him. There's an element of Homelander that he is a patriot in the sense that he's a patriot in a nationalistic sense, in almost a fascist sense, which is obviously relevant to the real world today, but there is an element of you know, some consideration of the American dream or whatever, the nuclear family, the 1950s bullshit where, you know,
yeah,
he and Becca are the mother and father, and so, you know, he shouldn't just melt her brain like he did with Stillwell. What other supes in the show do we know have kids? Definitely translucent.
Right, so we know a couple of the supers have kids. Like Mesmer has a daughter. We know that obviously translucent. So yeah, what I was curious about was if anyone else's powers were transferred genetically, because so far we've only heard about it being specifically from being injected with Compound V.
That's true, and it would, if so, I mean, clearly Homelander's were, and that would indicate that Compound V like literally changes your DNA, which I guess it would have to. We don't really know how it works.
But it's interesting that this is the first time we're really seeing it with a child.
Yeah, and it would see. There was a scene, the you know, iconic-ish scene last season where Butcher uses the soup baby as a weapon with the laser eyes.
Yeah.
So
well, the Compound V was there injecting that baby though. So
exactly, yeah. So babies that are injected with Compound V versus a kid that's actually born with the powers, right? Could potentially have, because, you know, she's obviously been raising this kid with assistance from Vought, because she drives over to that facility and yells at that guy for a while. So clearly she hasn't been doing this completely. She didn't go into hiding on her own, right? She's basically in Vaught's version of witness protection.
Yep, and the guy that she was yelling at was Dr. Park. I don't know if it's going to matter or not, but that could be the we that she was referring to earlier. Was like, it could be like we as in like me and Vought. It could be me as in Dr. Park, because that's who she's yelling at.
Right, when she said we thought it would be best for him to have a normal childhood.
But you know what I'm wondering, though, too, is that maybe with these kids, if they do have powers in future seasons or whatever, they could be the ones, they could be more normal. Because a lot of the issues with these superheroes that we have right now who are injected with Compound V is parents who are literally willing to sell their kids for money. So they're going to all come from really bad homes.
Or like Homelander, they were literally raised in a lab or something, which is potentially even worse.
Right.
Whereas this kid has had, basically, however old he is now, 10, has had a normal upbringing, or normal-ish. He doesn't seem to have any friends.
As normal as it can get, being in witness protection, but at least like a mom who truly loves him, who truly wants to raise him well. So
another thing I appreciate about these scenes is, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this trope or what it's called, but the trope of fridging, where female characters are killed or raped or in comas or are basically sidelined or otherwise gotten rid of for the purpose of the advancement of male character arcs. Butcher and Hughie's character arcs are both caused by the death of women, right? His girlfriend, Hughie's girlfriend, gets killed, Butcher's wife is killed, and that's their whole character arc. So that's pretty tropey. I think the show has done a really good job of handling a lot of this stuff. To have Butcher's wife be unfridged at the end of season 1 was interesting. I think that the show has shown that, you know, based on this episode, I think it's going to successfully follow through on that and make Becca an actual character. She has agency. She is standing up to Homelander. She's clearly terrified of him, as anyone would be, or as anybody should be, rather. But she's not going to take this lying down, you know, like, I appreciated the arc they gave her, and the characterization that they gave her, because this is the first time we've ever really seen. It
shows, like, you know, Billy Butcher's a lot to handle. So the fact that she is really strong and standing up to Homelander, I think that's great, because, like, who else could be with Billy Butcher? It's got to be someone who's strong-willed, too. And you also noted another important thing is that the kid also isn't having any of Homelander. He's realizing how bad, Brian, I think is his name, is realizing how bad Homelander is throughout this, too. He's seeming to be like, whoa.
Yeah, well, he's been raised, his mama raised him right, seems like. Yeah. Because the kid doesn't seem to be buying what Homelander is selling so far. Yeah. We'll see.
So, on to the boys. We get a funeral.
let's get to the boys. The titular boys.
Something that I noticed was that in the funeral scene, you see the edible arrangement, and that's how Mallory kind of suspects that maybe something with Butcher's going on. And we actually get a scene in season 1 where Raynor jokes with Butcher that she's going to send an edible arrangement to his funeral.
Yeah,
So
we
this
had
is a nice
we had to
callback.
we had to go back and look this up.
Yeah.
You caught on to it more than I did, but yeah, there's that scene where it's when he has sort of infiltrated Raynor's house in season 1, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he says it's a matter of life and death, and she says, "Great, I'll send an edible arrangement to your funeral."
Yeah.
So he sends an edible arrangement to hers. We don't know also what he says to her to convince her, because the conversation gets cut off. We know that they make a deal, and we are meant to believe in this episode that the deal is real, because they wind up following through on this information that he supposedly gets from her, which is the address where they find Kimiko's brother.
And yeah, the Halloween shop was great. I like seeing all those costumes that were like those dumb costumes you see with like by Leg Avenue or whatever that company is. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny I actually know the name of that company who makes like the
that's
sexy
a deep
version
cut.
of
That's
everything.
funny. That's funny for you to just pull that one out.
The fact that, and this was your note, but still, the fact that like they figure out as Kimiko's brother, everyone's like not gonna do anything except for Butcher. He doesn't care. He's still gonna shoot Kimiko's brother.
He's laser focused, and he's being very calculated about what he reveals to the boys. And I don't know why. I guess it's maybe to maintain some separation so that he can kind of, he is their leader. He's like their boss, right? In his mind, and so he wants to maintain a little bit of that aloofness from them, or maybe he just wants it to be a need to know thing. You can imagine some things would maybe go differently if he just confided in them to begin with. What was going on with him, but yeah, when push comes to shove, Mother's Milk and Frenchie side with Hughie, and it definitely takes Butcher off guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, then he ends up socking Hughie at the end of the episode too, because he didn't get what he wanted.
He didn't get what he wanted, and Hughie interfered. I mean, even if Hughie hadn't interfered and Butcher had shot the brother, I think Mother's Milk and Frenchie would have interfered. Frenchie certainly would have, and probably Mother's Milk as well. I mean, the bonds that they have formed over the however long Butcher was missing, at this point, supersede whatever hold Billy or whatever influence Billy has over them.
And they also,
and Billy's he's desperate, understandably so, but like there has to be another way, I think is what one of them says, and they'll figure it out. It's very different from the comics where from the moment from the first issue when Butcher goes and recruits Hughie after Robin gets killed, the female, as she's only called the female in the comics, she doesn't have a name. The female is already part of the crew. She and Frenchie are already thick as thieves. And so this whole element of them finding her and getting to know her and her becoming part of the team is not an element from the books, but I think it works a lot better in the show. Yeah, you definitely get to know her through them finding out about her. Speaking of which, the scene between her and her brother where they're talking about there's a couple of scenes between her and her brother, but these scenes where they talk about their background, they talk about their childhood, growing up, getting kidnapped, their village. He reveals to her that their village has been destroyed by some superhero. All of that stuff. I mean, these two scenes, the handful of scenes, are more characterization than she gets throughout the entire run of the comic books, as far as I can tell. I'm 40 something. I'm like 2/3 done with the comics, and it's I really love what they're doing with her character. The actress Karen Fukuhara she does so much without ever speaking. She's great. She's really good. I just find the whole thing. There are a couple things that we got from that too. The superhero, quote, came shrieking out of the sky like a demon. And again, it's like the question, like, okay, which hero was that? As far as I know, Black Noir, we saw him earlier, but I don't think he can fly. I don't know his powers, but like it sounds like someone who could then fly or jump really high or something like that. Why did you go straight to Black Noir?
because we saw him killing terrorists in the first episode. That's the only reason that I jumped to, like, maybe it could have been Black Noir.
That's true.
That's the only reason. But, like, I don't think his powers, as far as I know, he doesn't have those powers.
Yeah, not that we've seen, but we don't know what his powers are. I mean, we saw in the first episode he got hella exploded on, and his flesh was all burned, and he seemed completely unfazed by it. So it's not, he doesn't have indestructible skin like Translucent did, but he's obviously completely impervious to pain somehow.
Yeah, or regenerative skin or something like that. Or who knows?
He's
or maybe
stealthy.
he's a burnt flesh underneath, and that's why he wears his costume all the time.
He's just Deadpool.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. I mean, who knows? And then we know that he's super strong.
So Kimiko and her brother fight. It's sad. The boys roll up. They capture the brother, and Butcher punches Hughie's lights out. Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads plays.
I guess the questions that I think is like, okay, Hughie, it looked like he almost wasn't going to get back in the van, and he did. So how's he going to react to Butcher now? How's he going to react to the boys now? What are they going to do with Kimiko's brother? Because clearly Butcher seemed to want to kill him. So, like, what are they going to do with him now since they didn't end up killing him?
I have the same questions you do. What are they going to do now? I want to see more of Stormfront. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, me too. I want to see how she ends up really interacting with the group and what she brings about.
Well, that is all we have to say about The Boys Season 2, Episode 2. We're going to be back real soon, breaking down Episode 3 as well, of course, because they all dropped at once. Until then, thank you for watching. Leave us a comment below with anything you noticed that we failed to mention. Hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Rogue Cheddar.
And I am Dave at the Dave Klein.
See you guys next time.